All at once they spread across the sky as if they were exploding. Then the lake froze. Not a single lizardman present understood what had happened, not the uncommonly able tribal chief Shasaryu, not the brilliant priest Crush, not the experienced traveler Zayusu. Even these lizardmen, with faculties matchless throughout all lizardman history, couldn't immediately comprehend what had taken place. It was so outrageous. They couldn't comprehend how their feet were below the ice. Moments later, after their brains had processed what had just happened, the screams went up. Every lizardman, yes, all of them shrieked. Even Zayusu, Crush, and Shasaryu did. Even the one who probably had the most courage, Zenbal, lost himself in a fear that welled from the bottom of his heart and climbed straight out of his soul to manifest in a scream. It was a horrible reality. The lake, which had never iced over, the lake that had never changed ever since they were born, had warped and frozen. The lizardmen panicked and pulled their legs up. Luckily, the ice wasn't too thick. It broke right away, but it immediately refroze. The chill coming from below proved they weren't seeing things. It was biting cold. Flustered, Zayusu hopped up on a mud wall and surveyed the scene. The view left him speechless. Everything in his field of vision was frozen. Certainly the entire lake couldn't be frozen, but as far as his eyes could see, everything was covered in ice. Worries about his fish preserve popped up in his mind. But now wasn't the time. Crush hopped next to Zayusu. When she surveyed the area, her jaw fell open just like his. Her voice sounded like a soul had left her. No way, Zayusu didn't want to believe it either. "You monster," he barked, hoping it would ease the fear. Shasaryu's roar echoed. Several lizardmen had collapsed. The members of the warrior caste who were all right worked together to pull them out of the frozen marsh. All the lizardmen being pulled were pale and trembling. The rising chill was probably sapping their life force. "Brother, I am going to go check around the village." Zayusu had frost pain, so this level of chill wouldn't affect him. "No, don't go, why not? They were probably going to make their move." "I won't let you leave us now. Keep an eye on the enemy. I forbid you to miss a single thing. You've traveled the world and have all sorts of knowledge. You the lizardman for this job." Shifting his gaze from Zayusu, Shasaryu called out to the warriors in the area. "I am going to cast the chill defense spell Ice Energy Protection. Go around the village and tell everyone to stay away from the ice. I'll cast too." "Great. Then you and I will split up the work. If you see anyone in trouble, cast a healing spell on them." Crush and Shasaryu managed to safely begin casting the protective magic on the lizardmen. Zayusu stayed up on the mud wall with his keen gaze aimed at the enemy line. He didn't want to miss a single move. He had to do exactly what his brother told him. "Hup." Zenbal hopped up on the wall next to him and checked the enemy lines in an easygoing way. "Take it a little easier. Your brother is just like that, right? He has high expectations of your know-how. Even if you miss something, he won't get mad. More importantly, if you focus too hard, your field of vision will shrink." Zenbal's unconcerned voice was soothing. It was just like in the fight with the Elder Lick. Everyone needed to do what they could, and they would add all their efforts together. Zayusu looked around and saw that warriors had also jumped up on the wall to observe the enemy. He wasn't fighting alone. He was fighting with a great many friends. It seemed like he'd been shaken up by the display of that overwhelming power. Zayusu exhaled like he was breathing out something that had festered in his heart. "Sorry, it's fine, but yeah, you Ray here too, HMPH. Don't expect much in the brains department." They laughed a bit together as they watched the enemy's movements. "But yeesh, those are some serious monsters." "Yeah." They Ray on another level, the King of Death, arrogant yet impressive like a true king, was eyeing the Lizardman village. His body should have been small, but it seemed to have swelled dozens of times larger. That's gotta be the guy they call the Great One. Probably. I don't want to believe they have more than one monster who can use magic powerful enough to freeze the lake. Seriously. I get it. To monsters who can do this kind of stuff, we lizard men must be like little specks of dirt. Shit. We Ray no better than worms. Oh, he's moving. The caster who had frozen the river raised his free hand and waved toward the village. It must be a signal. Zayusu's hunch came true in horrifying fashion directly after that. Voices cried out from here and there throughout the village. "What is that? What the heck is that?" Nothing could surprise him anymore, or so Zayusu had thought, but what he saw made him practically shriek involuntarily. What stood before them was a giant statue. It had 2 arms and 2 legs, and appeared to be made out of stone. A red light pulsed, almost like a heartbeat, from the bedrock of its thick chest. It had solid arms and solid legs. Its squat body might have even been rather cute if the thing hadn't stood almost 100 feet tall. This gigantic statue had suddenly appeared out of the forest. At this point, believing it was an illusion made more sense. The giant statue moved slowly, raising a huge boulder from who knew where. Then the hulking creature threw it. Zayusu instinctively covered his face. All those in the gigantic stone's path would surely die. In the darkness their world had become, Zayusu was struck at once by a tremendous rumbling and a sound like an explosion. The wall beneath him swayed intensely, creaking. Along with a roar like heavy rain, the kicked-up dirt falling back to the ground, came the cries of children and adults from the village. Despite having braced themselves, they were unable to withstand this fear, which was beyond anything they could have imagined. Even though they made it through the previous battle, this was enough to regress them to small children. Relieved he had his life, Zayusu timidly opened his eyes to see the undead army beginning to move. The giant statue was gone. They approached the newly fallen huge stone, lying in the marsh about midway between the two groups. They held their flat shields over their heads and crouched down. More skeletons nimbly kept their balance and got up on the shields of the first ones. Then they held their own shields up in the same way. Zayusu shook like he'd been struck by lightning when he understood what they were doing. Are they building stairs? Who uses troops that would inspire songs of praise in legends to build stairs? They worked toward the top of the rock at an uncanny speed. The staircase built out of the undead army took shape. Then some other undead soldiers began to move, about 100, even more magnificent undead. In their hands they clutched spears like lancers might hold, decorated with fabric. Crimson cloth with the same crest was stitched into each pennon. They stepped now into the marsh in perfect alignment, crimson capes fluttering behind them. They proceeded without speaking, crunching the ice under their feet. They were in perfect order, maintaining their intervals as they advanced across the marsh. Then they crossed their lances with the warriors opposite them. The alternating lances formed a corridor leading up the rock. A path for the king. Zenbul was exactly right. The caster of death stepped into the corridor of undead. No one knew when the figures following him had appeared. In front stood the caster, whose power was now impossible to fathom. He was clad in a robe so black it appeared to be cut from darkness. The staff in his hand radiated a dark red aura. Anguished human faces would form, warp, and dissipate inside it. The face beneath the hood was skeletal. A crimson color flickered in his vacant orbits. He was equipped with an abundance of magic accessories impossible for Zayusu to comprehend. He walked forward with the majestic gait of a king. Attending slightly behind the king of death was a woman in white. Her appearance was human-like, but a few things suggested otherwise. Like the wings at her hips, could that be a demon? Demons, a moniker that encompassed beings from the netherworld. These beings included fiends, which caused destruction with violence, and they included devils, which caused depravity with their wits. They were the height of wickedness. The purpose of their existence was to ruin every intelligent, good person. In other words, these monsters were synonyms for evil. Zayusu had heard of their kind on his travels. He knew how horrible they were. About 200 years ago, a monster worthy of being called the King of Demons, an evil spirit, came with its underlings. They nearly destroyed the world. In the end, the 13 heroes defeated them. Even now, scars from that battle remained in some places. If undead were beings that hated the living, then demons existed to torment them. Behind the demon walked a pair of dark elf twins. A silver-haired girl followed them. Then came a strange monster that glided through the air. Finally, a man like a human with a tail walked by. The strange monster was the only one who didn't seem immensely powerful. All the others were enough to make the entire length of Zayusu's tail quiver. His wild instincts were urging him to run away as fast as he can. The party walked silently up the stairs beneath the pennons. They stepped on the undead soldiers with zero hesitation and ascended to the top of the giant rock like champions. The king of the dead at the front of the line moved his hands. A tall throne suddenly appeared, sparkling raven black, and he sat down. The ones behind him, who appeared to be aides, lined up and turned their gazes to the village as if they were watching for something. But they didn't do anything else. What in the world is this? A few lizardmen glanced at one another anxiously. They decided to leave the decision-making to the cleverest one present. What should we do, Mr. Zayusu? Should we get ready to run? The voice contained not the slightest will to fight. The lizardman's tail was drooping helplessly, speaking volumes for his internal state. No need for that. Think back to the time with the Elder Lick. This caster seems way more powerful than that, right? He should have no problem ignoring this distance and unleashing an attack right now. He probably has something he wants to say. The lizardman seemed to understand. Without taking his eyes off the advancing attendants, Zayusu continued observing the immensely powerful monster on top of the rock. He watched as if he were one of the masses looking up at his king. He was determined to not miss a thing. At this distance, he was able to observe quite a lot of detail. Their eyes even met. Was the King of Death observing him too? The lack of hostility from the Dark Elves was surprising. The silver-haired girl had a smug grin. The demon was horrifying in how kind she seemed. He wasn't sure about the strange monster. He couldn't sense any emotion from the eyes of the man with the tail. After enough time had passed for them to observe each other, the King of Death once again brought his free hand up near his chest. Several lizardmen reacted by flailing their tails in distress. Don't be afraid. Don't show the enemy that shameful display. Zayusu's reprimand cut like a knife. The lizardmen in the area all straightened. Multiple black hazes appeared before the King of Death, 20, to be exact. The swirling mists swelled to about 5 feet high. Before long, myriad faces had formed within them. Those as Zayusu recalled the monster that had come to the villages and the undead he'd encountered on his travels. He'd given a rough explanation back in Crush's village how it was really only possible to damage this type of insubstantial monster by using enchanted weapons made of certain metals, magic, or certain martial arts. Even with all the lizard tribes put together, they had only a handful of magic weapons. In other words, it would be hard to take out even one of this particular type of undead, and their opponent could spawn 20 of them like it was nothing. I guess that's what it means to be the ruler of death, Zayusu thought, losing heart. He remembered the Elder Lick, who was plenty powerful in his own right, and how he had devoted himself completely to this being. The caster on the rock murmured something and waved his hand. He said, "Go." The undead flew to surround the village and said in unison, "We relay the words of the Great One. The Great One would like to speak with you. The one who shall represent you will step forward immediately. Know that taking too long will only displease the Great One." Upon making their declaration, the incorporeal monsters flew back to their creator and master. The heck, that's all. Zayusu's mouth gaped idiotically. So he used those powerful undead just to tell us that. But what he really couldn't believe was what happened at a signal from the ruler of death. The silver-haired girl brought her hands swiftly together. The moment her hands connected, the hazy undead ceased to exist. What? Zayusu was so surprised he shouted in spite of himself. They hadn't returned the summoned monsters, but just wiped them out. Eliminating undead like that was something the priest class could do. Usually they had enough trouble just exorcising them, but with a big enough disparity in power, it was possible to annihilate them. But doing so to a large number would be much harder. In other words, the silver-haired girl was equal to the King of Death despite being his follower. The other followers lined up with her were probably just as powerful. Zayusu couldn't stop laughing. Of course he couldn't what else was there to do but laugh. This stark power imbalance was just Zayusu. "Oh brother," hearing the voice from below the wall, Zayusu looked down to find Shasaryu and Crush. They climbed up and examined the caster's party. Crush crammed herself between Zayusu and Zenbel. She nearly caused Zenbel to fall, but he decided to let it slide. "So that's the enemy boss. Just looking at him makes me start to expect a knife in the back. He looks like the Elder Lick you guys beat, but he's probably way stronger, Did you finish on your end?" "MPH, pretty much. Crush and I are both out of magical energy, and from what those messengers said, we have to take care of that first. About that, will you come with me?" For a few moments, Zayusu just regarded Shasaryu in silence. Then he nodded emphatically. For a split second, Shasaryu made a pained expression, but before anyone else could notice, his usual face returned. "Sorry, no worries, brother." With that, Shasaryu hopped off the wall. The thin ice over the marsh broke and a splash rang out. "Okay, we ray off, be careful." Zayusu gave Crush a tight hug and then hopped down into the marsh after his brother. Zayusu and Shasryu walked over, crunching through the ice. As they exited the village gate, Zayusu felt the King of Death's gaze on them. It felt like physical pressure. He sensed concerned looks behind them. The strongest one must have belonged to Crush. He desperately suppressed the intense emotions that made him ache with longing. Abruptly breaking their silence, Shasryu spoke. "Sorry, my brother, because if this talk goes badly, we're sure to be killed as an example." Zayusu knew that. That was why he squeezed Crush so tightly. "Considering how many of them there are, I couldn't let you go alone. Besides, they probably think we were making light of them if we only sent one." Zayusu was a Lizardman, people knew. He was an appropriate second for the dialogue, but caste-wise, he was a traveler. If he were killed, it wouldn't greatly affect Lizardman's solidarity. Even if a hero died, as long as the chiefs were still around, the Lizardmen could fight. It would be a shame if they lost Frost Pain, but he couldn't have left it behind. He needed it to withstand the chill coming off the frozen lake. The pair walked in silence, one step, then another, closer to death. When they reached the bottom of the undead stairs leading to the throne, they called out. If the throne had been set back from the edge, they might have gone up. But since there was no room for them, it probably wasn't the King of Death's intention to have them climb the stairs. The king would stand on higher ground. Lizardmen didn't have the custom that many other races had that superiors should be elevated. Of course, considering they come for a discussion, one could say this treatment was rude. In other words, it could mean only that their enemy had called them there under the guise of a dialogue, but had absolutely zero interest in talking to them. But really, it was presumptuous of them to expect equal treatment. Certainly, Zayusu and the others had won the previous battle, but one look at the enemies lined up on that rock, and they had to admit, even if they didn't like it, that their win was meaningless. It had been nothing more than childish play. Here we are, I'm the representative of the Lizardmen, Shasryu Shasha, and this is the strongest Lizardman, Zayusu Shasha. Still, there was no sense from their voices that they were trying to curry favor. They knew it was foolish. It was their last bit of pride. That battle may have been childish play to their enemy, but they couldn't let the pride of the warriors who had died be for nothing. There was no reply. The king on his throne only gave them an openly appraising once-over. There was no sign of movement. The one who answered was the demon with black wings sprouting from her hips. "Our master doesn't believe you in the appropriate posture to hear him speak." "What?" In response to their confusion, the woman called to the one who looked like a man with a tail. He was standing next to her. "Demiurge, you will bow down." Suddenly, Zayusu and Shasryu got down on their knees. They plunged their heads into the muddy marsh. They couldn't help but think it was the right thing to do. Frigid, muddy water clung to their bodies. The broken ice refroze. They essentially couldn't get back up. No matter how much strength they put into moving, they didn't budge. Their bodies were robbed of all freedom, as if a giant invisible hand were pressing down on them from above. Don't struggle. The moment this command reached their ears, a new brain grew in both Zayusu and Shasryu. This brain would listen to someone else's orders. They sensed themselves moving according to it. Seeing the two weakened Lizardmen bowing humiliatingly into the mud, the demon lady seemed satisfied. She spoke to her master. "Lord Aints, it appears they've assumed the listening posture." "Thanks, raise your heads." "You are permitted to raise your heads." Moving the only part of their bodies that they could freely, Zayusu and Shasryu looked up, as if in awe of his supremeness. "I am the ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick. My name is Aints Ulgaun. I offer you my thanks for assisting with that experiment earlier." "Experiment? We lost so many of our friends, and he calls it an experiment." Violent emotion at the horror of it blazed up in Zayusu's heart, but he held it back. It was still too soon. "Now then, what I'd like to discuss is you entering under our rule." Shasryu was about to say something, but the caster Aints stopped him by raising a hand slightly. Realizing nothing good would come of ignoring him and speaking, Shasryu obediently kept quiet. "But I am sure you don't want to be ruled by the army you just defeated in battle, so we're going to attack you again in 4 hours. If you can claim victory yet again, I promise to withdraw entirely. I'll even pay an adequate amount of reparations. May I ask a question?" "That is fine. Ask away." "Will the one attacking be you, Sir Gown?" The silver-haired girl behind him moved her eyebrows slightly, and the lady demon's smile intensified.